back to Grit for Life, our workshop of living wild and running free. What you don't see off camera is all the bloopers and things like that. We were in the middle of doing an episode, and the camera fell off the tripod and gave you a beautiful view of the ground. But that's the beauty of doing things like this and doing it with the technology that we have. What does it mean to be wild and free? Are we ever really wild and free? Talking to my wife earlier off camera, she brought up the unique perspective that this is one of the reasons that I'm grateful to have Katie with me here on this thing, is because sometimes I can get very tunnel visioned, and she comes in as she does it in our marriage and gives me a different perspective of things. And I go, oh yeah. Oh
yeah.
Okay. Are we ever really wild and free? Or is the stage, do we take, when we are born, do we get put onto life stage? You hear it referred to as a stage of life sometimes. And is it that sometimes that spotlight that shines on us is really broad and all the lights on the stage are well lit and we can go anywhere we want on the stage? And then at other times it comes down to a narrow spotlight and we're having to stay in that spotlight. Does it mean that we're free? I think as men and women, that light is like society versus reality, as in how we need to look at ourselves. We need to make sure that we are not allowing society, family patterns to keep that spotlight really narrow, because we have a whole stage that we can use, that we need to be free on, and we need to be able to move about on. Having been raised the way that I originally was raised, my spotlight was very narrow. I found myself very restricted by really narrow religious beliefs. I would at the time not consider it that way. I considered myself free. I was taught that by living the way that I was living and being being raised the way I was raised, that was truly what we were made to be for. The older I got, the more angrier I became. The older I got, the more aggressive. Those who have known Grit for Life for a while knows that I've shared this. The man that I used to be is not the man that sits in front of the camera. Not the man that would be married to this woman here, because she would have never given me the time of day. It is the man that I have become by taking steps to live by certain principles that has allowed me to find what is worth my life within me, learning what's important to me, and then expanding that out into my role as a husband, my role in the world, my role as a father, and then my role as an instructor and a mentor. From a women's perspective, what does living wild and free mean to you, and how has that started shaping you? And
for me, it's discovering what that means for each person. Like for me, it might look very different than it would for someone else. For me, living wild and running free is really about knowing who I am, knowing what I'm comfortable with, what I'm not comfortable with. It's about letting go of what other people think. That's a really hard one to do. But the most freedom that I have found within myself is letting go. And like, I don't care that person over there thinks I'm a wackadoodle because I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing over here. Like, that's who I am. This is like just being unapologetically me.
Oh, that's good.
Unapologetically me. And the rest of the world, it doesn't matter. Like, yes, there are certain people, like, I do put value in what you think about me because I love you and I care about your opinion of me. Does that necessarily mean I'm going to change who I am at the core? No, but I do want to also have your opinion, and I want your perspective on stuff, but and be able to take your perspective on what's going on in our life, into account when I am then proceeding with life.
Let me ask you on that note, because I think that's really good, and that's powerful. Would that work with me if I had not been through what I've been through and have not become the man that the striving to live wild and free in my own life, separate from you? Would that work? And I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but in the aspect of, could you talk about living wild and free in your own life, being you, not caring what other people think, but then you also brought in the aspect of, I do care what you think, not in the aspect of changing myself, but I care what you think because I love you. But for the person who's out there in a relationship who hears your voice and says, I want to be me, but I do care what the other person thinks, but that other person wants me to be something I'm not.
Right. And so, and again, it's taken me a very long time to get to where I am, and it's been battle after battle, and I still continue to fight battles on caring what people think. It's not an easy thing to do, to let go of other people's opinions of you, because of the validation that we as humans need from each other. Um, but I will say that there are people in my life who I care deeply about them as a person, but their opinions of what I should be doing with my life are not they don't match up with who I am. And I can still love that person and care about their opinion, but that doesn't mean that I am going to really take it to heart, and I'm going to change what I'm doing because of it. There are certain things with certain people that I will change because it affects our intimate relationship. Like, whether that be with you as a husband, or our kids, or my students at school. If I need to change the way I am doing something,
right,
there's a difference between changing the way I'm approaching something rather than changing who I am.
That's good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So what I'm hearing too is that, like I talk about the principles that guide me. I'm hearing the same with you, though, is that you had to find those base principles that define you. Do you think that someone can live wild and free without finding those principles? Or is that part of the process of it?
I think that's part of the process.
Okay.
Because I think being your authentic self, you have to really do the hard work to search for what is valuable to you. And what's valuable to me now, and my principles now, are not necessarily the same principles that I held when I was 20 years old, 15 years old. Right. Even 10 years ago. Different values, different perspectives, and where my priorities are. And it's a constant journey of searching myself and learning myself at all of these various stages of my life.
So the principles grow
and expand,
and you, because of it, you change. But you're changing not for somebody else. You're changing because your self-reflection has shown you as a better person, a better way of doing it.
Yes, and it's also different stages in life bring different sets of priorities.
And speaking on that, I think that I want to address from the man's perspective that when we're talking about living wild and living free, it is that understanding that one of the things my wife brought up that I thought was really important is learning to be her. Growing up, I thought I was wild. I thought I was free because this box, and we talked about we talk about this in several of these different videos, but the box that I was raised in, I was raised that you had to get dirty, you had to, all these different things to be a man. And then as I started growing older and going through my different phases of life, you ever look back at a photo and you go, what in the world was I thinking wearing that or doing that way?
My permed bangs.
Right.
That is just a great example.
Well, and I remember, again, you drawing on my experience, I remember having been married before and having an ex that stated, you don't even know who you are because one day you're wearing cowboy boots and a cowboy hat, and the next day you're wearing a jersey, and you're talking like this, and you're doing that, and that really opened my eyes to find out how to start living wild and free. You have to have that self reflection. We're too scared to do that so many times because it takes a lot of work,
It does take a lot of work.
and that's hard
And it's exhausting.
because it may mean that you realize that some of the things that were taught to you by your parents, whether you feel they were good parents or bad parents, wasn't necessarily right. May have been the best that they had at the time.
Well, and it's also learning what's right for your parents doesn't have to be what's right for you.
Mm.
Because, or my grandparents, like their political views, or, even in my political journey of where I sit, whether it's liberal or middle of the road, or with you and listening to your more conservative side, like it their thoughts and opinions are not incorrect for who they are and where they are in life, but for where I am and where I am in my own life,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't work for me. I
Right.
don't agree with it. That I'm going to take a different path. I'm going to explore something different. And it's also they're doing the best with what they have at the time. My parents did that all the time. They did the best they could given the circumstances, and I applaud them for that. But the way I was raised isn't always the way that I choose to live my life.
So in going on that, that's where it's really difficult and hard. But again, from the man and the woman's perspective, you need to be okay. You need to see the importance of self reflection. You need to see the importance. When you're talking about wild and free, sometimes we get that image of the outside, and we're out in the middle of the Arizona desert. You have to. You have to. You have to. I had to come to the very bottom, very bit of rock bottom. And if you've heard my story, you know what I'm talking about. I was so depressed, I was so broken that I didn't even want to get out of bed. I had to realize, just as she said, the way I was taught, maybe the only way they knew, or maybe it was working for them, but not necessarily working for me. And not, I'm watching broken marriages. I'm watching myself become broken. I'm watching my relationship with my kids become broken. I'm finding myself becoming angry. I used to be a very, very angry person. And I finally came to that point, like, I didn't want to be angry anymore. I didn't want to be this raging inside. And I wanted to be able to live. This wasn't life. This wasn't life. And I couldn't be happy no matter what. And I was seeking validation in other things. I was seeking happiness in other people, in other things, whether it be a job. I see so many men and women going to jobs every single day that they don't love, they don't like, they don't find happiness. They're going to a home, whether it be with their spouse or whether it just be alone or whether it be with their kids, and they're not happy, and they're feeling captured and they feel captivated, and they're not living wild and free. And I came to that point in my life and I said, I'm done. So I have two options. And one option is should never be on the table, but that option at the time was I could either take myself out of the life, period. Take my life, be done with it all. Or I can make the changes to start living the life that I want to live. And in order to do that, I had to make some really hard decisions. I had finding the principles I live by now was not easy because some of the principles I live with now I got by realizing I wasn't being the man I needed to be. I wasn't being a man worth being married to. I wasn't being a man worth calling dad. And what does that look like? Because that's not a wild and free life. And men out there, I want to tell you that your life, you need to really reflect right now. You're saying you're taking this workshop because there's something that spoke to you. Several of you, I know this is your workshop. I know there are a couple of you. This is your very first workshop, and you're saying, I needed to take it. You don't even know why you need to take it, and now you're knowing why. Because you need to stop for a second and ask yourself, is the man that I am, the man that I think I am, is it really the man that I see in the mirror? And it's society tells us men that we just power on. Society tells us men that we fight on. Don't look back, and sometimes don't worry about the carnage that you create. Just keep pushing forward. And sadly, the carnage is our children. The carnage is our marriage. The carnage is our relationships. And before we know it, we are left feeling alone. Yeah, we may have a career, but if you don't have the family support, a general once told me your career is like a train. You probably, if you've been part of Grit for Life, you've heard me use this analogy before. Your career is like a train, and it's great for a ride. But when that train pulls into the station, if your family's not on this at the station waiting for you, it wasn't worth it. And several of you are probably sitting there going, "That's what I feel like." But then you look back, and to look back makes you have to admit that your train ran over your family when you were driving it. So how do we look forward to be able to live that life of freedom that allows you to be free in the choices you make and be able to have that family or those loved ones there who are joining you with it? How is it that you can get up every day and be proud of the man that you see looking in the mirror? And I'm going to be talking about that from a women's perspective. I know I just said a lot of stuff. What's on your mind? What's on your heart to share?
Well, be a little bit more specific.
Just whatever's on. I mean, what's you hear me say those things, and that's from a man's perspective.
Okay, here's one thing that when you talk about the man's perspective and the job, if I'm gonna relate that to a woman and taking care of the family or running the household, it is finding that. Let me see if I can get this out coherently. Finding that balance of what's important within the house. I know that I get stuck on dishes have to be done, the living room needs to be cleaned, the laundries, like all of the tasks, along with the career and getting everything done for work, but making sure that the kids are taken care of, that there's food on the table, that it tastes good, that like all of those things. And I know women have their careers too, and that can also resonate. Some of the stuff that you were saying also resonates with me in my own career and putting my career first. But then from that mothering aspect of what's really important. Is it really important that the living room is spotless right now? Or is it important that I'm spending time with the kids in that living room doing stuff? Is it really important that our house is spotless all the time? Or is it more important that I'm getting experiences? Or is it more important that I am taking time for myself to do things to feed my own soul, or to even lead by example for the kids, for the people around me, that it is important to take care of yourself. It's important to do the things you love and not to push them aside all the time because there are tasks that need to be done. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like finding that balance of it, even in the small day-to-day life. Does it matter that the kids' room is really clean? Does it matter that they cleaned it in the way you would have cleaned it? I struggle with that one. What does clean look like to me versus what clean looks like to our daughter or our son?
Right.
Either one of them. It's not the same definition of clean. Does it really matter? Like what's the goal? What's the purpose? Like in that moment? And am I running the kids over with my task oriented something needs to happen rather than experiencing something with them?
So let me ask, we talk about what it means to live wild and free. We talk about that self-reflection part is important. That's where it really starts. So I want to give you a couple of points. I want you to, while I'm talking, I want you to think of some points that, and maybe they're the same,
Okay.
but I want you to think of some points that maybe I've either missed or from a lady's perspective. And I don't think they will be much different. I think because when it comes to humanity, what you need to do is you need to stop and you need to first admit that if you're not happy and you don't feel, and you're watching this, you don't feel like you're living wild and free. In the context that of that life stage, is your spotlight really narrow or is it a lot larger? You need to first admit your role in that. Here at Grit for Life, we talk about all the time, and you'll hear me say it in this series over and over. My kids and my family have heard me say it more than once that they already know as soon as I start to say it what I'm going to say. Your response is your responsibility. That is my life motto. That works in hand with every single decision I make. You need to understand that your response in life doesn't matter what has happened in the past, what mistakes you've made in the past, or what others have done to you. Your response here and now, watching this video, is now your responsibility. You need to admit, if I am not where I want to be, then it's my responsibility to change it. Then how do we start doing that? We're going to be talking about some steps that you can take. We're going to be talking about some mindfulness. We're going to be talking about, I'm a very avid reader. I think it's important to read. I'm going to be talking about men, what you can do to better communicate with your wife. And I'm hoping that she will give some perspectives on how she can better communicate, you can better communicate as women to your men, as your significant other. We're hoping to talk about from a parent's perspective, how we're teaching our kids. But what you need to do right now is you need to first of all admit, I probably not have done this. I've done this to maybe the best of my ability so far, but maybe not. Maybe I've just been winging it. I've been making mistakes. Admit those mistakes, but don't hold on to them. We talk about a lot of times, you have to learn to forgive yourself for the past. Learn from it. Don't drag it to the future. So what I want you to do today is I want you, your sole portion of this day is this. Find out and admit. Write it down if you need to, and I highly suggest you write it down. Say, listen, I am where I'm at today because of my response. I'm not where I want to be. I want to live more freer. I want to be happier. I want to be what my soul cries out to be. We're going to be talking about some steps on how to do that. One of the reasons why we're out at this ranch, and how I'm going to talk to my wife. My wife she's amazing at mindfulness, and really, she really keeps our family grounded in that aspect. What are my principles? We talk about principles. Both of us talked about them. And I'm going to list mine really quickly. We're going to get into them later on in another video. My principles, and my family knows this. What's my number one principle? Is family.
Family first.
Family first. Always. My wife and my kids know every decision, no matter what my dream, my goal, how I think it might look, is my family first. If you have a family, if you hope to have a family, man or woman, you need to understand your family should come first. If you are not ready for that, that's okay. But then you hopefully you don't have a family yet. It's okay to be single without kids and focus solely on yourself. You need to understand that. That is 100% okay. Again, that goes back to the social norms of, well, you have to get married, you have to have kids, you have to. No, you don't. You do you. But if you have chosen that, even if it wasn't what it was meant to be originally, if you chose it because it's what society wanted, well, now you're there. Your family needs to be first. Family first. And then how do I make myself a better person on the stage that I am, in the field that I'm running wild and running free? Self-reflect. Start taking a look. Write down some of the things that you think you need to work on, and that's going to take some grit. We call this Grit for Life for several reasons, and that's going to take some grit. It took me writing down my failures as a parent, but not dwelling on them. You can't feel, yes, you can feel some guilt, and there will be guilt. That's normal, and that's natural. But you can't stay and wallow in that grit. As a soldier, I now am in the middle of a firefight. Well, how am I going to do to get out of it? I may have made the wrong turn and walked into an area I know I wasn't supposed to be in, but now I'm there. What do I do now? And so you need to take that understanding and figure out where it is. And maybe you don't know yet, but you say, hey, these are some steps that I need to take, or these are some things I want to work on. Whether it's, she talked about learning as a mother. I know that, learning what's important. Is the experience important, or is it, this needs to be done, this needs to be done, this needs to be done, and you miss the experience. Real quick, because I know we're running lengthy on time, one of the things I have to work on a lot is that soldier mentality. Is you have phase lines you have to hit a certain time, and they have to be hit at that certain time. I've had to work on, with my family, you say 7 o'clock, that may mean 7:30. And at 7 o'clock, I'm not sitting there getting angry and raging and yelling at my family. Instead, I'm living in that moment, and we're going to talk about that in mindfulness. So what I want you to do for your soul portion is write down a letter to yourself about how you believe that you might have gotten to where you are not living wild and free. In that letter, I want you to forgive yourself for the mistakes that you have made. That's important. And then write a couple of things that come to mind of where you would like to work on. That's the beauty of living in the wild. We've got flies everywhere.
Yeah, and I got bit by an ant just a couple minutes ago.
So, but I want you to write down a couple of things that you want to start working on. Hopefully we can help you, give you an avenue of approach of how to start working on that. I hope that you guys are getting something out of this. Again, we're winging this. Normally we have a lot of structure, but I just didn't feel as if that needed to be in this video series.
We're wild and free.
Right. Your response is your responsibility. Go grit it.